Hey yo, what is up FPG fam? Further here and welcome back to another Wuthering Waves video. So the homie Chaotic put out this video earlier today titled Wuthering Waves has a massive opportunity, my only concern. Naturally this caught my attention. I wanted to react to this with you all to see what the homie has to say, what his concerns are, and maybe give my thoughts and opinions on what he's talking about. So I do hope you enjoyed today's video. I do hope you get some value from it. I'll have a link to his video in the description down below for you to check out, sub to his channel, show him some support. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop in. Let's see what's going on here.
Wuthering Waves has become the talk of the town as the most recent developer interview shows how much Kuro Games is willing to work in order to capture the attention of potential players.
Right, the hype is real.
Of a second closed beta test,
hey, let's pray we get in.
Available right now. I want to discuss what caught my attention during the developer interview and why this made a fantastic impression to everyone who watched.
Okay.
If any of you watched any of the content that surfaced during the Chinese exclusive technical test or during the first global closed beta, you saw the quality of the game, and while combat was exciting, it was obvious that the game still needed work.
Okay, I want to pause it there, and I'll be pausing this video probably quite often to give my thoughts and opinions on what he's speaking about. So to touch on this topic really quickly, I got into closed beta 1, played the mess out of it. I dumped a lot of hours into that closed beta so that way I can learn all the intricacies of Wuthering Waves with the time period that I had with it. And what I will say, the biggest takeaway that I got is that the gameplay and combat is second to none. It's a chef's kiss, absolutely. Now, the rest of the game outside of that, there was a lot left to be desired, which was to be understood because it was closed beta 1 before that. All they had was a technical test. So the combat and gameplay, chef's kiss. It was amazing. But outside of that, it was a lot left to be desired, like I mentioned. So I do understand what he's talking about here. Luckily, we have closed beta 2 coming up. So hopefully they expounded upon that. And, you know, upon official release, hopefully they develop more outside of just the combat and gameplay. We know that they are still improving the combat and gameplay, which is fantastic because I think that's going to be the core integral part of this game and what draws people the most. But outside of that, we needed more, right? To keep us engaged, to keep us immersed, and keep us within the game of Wuthering Waves. But let's see what else he has to say here.
Still had a lot of work to do, but I don't think any of us saw how much change was coming from Kuro Games.
Right.
During the dev interview, they announced that 90% of the story, or about 90% of the story, was rewritten.
That's huge.
I often see many people say that a game is too close to release in order to make changes to the story and gameplay, but Kuro Game has basically decided to use 6 months of their time developing the game to rewrite damn near everything.
Okay, and I want to touch on that because I believe that needs to be commended at bare minimum and needs to be applauded because I think most companies and developers wouldn't have done that. I don't think they would have within 6 months rewritten and rehauled and revamped the entirety of the story, or at least I would consider 90% pretty much the entirety of the story, because you have to think of all that goes into doing that, right? That's a massive decision to make and a tough one at that. You have to think that with rewriting 90% of the story, we now have to create brand new animations for the new story, right? Which means then we have to get the voice actors back in for new dialogue, for new scripts that we have to write because it's a new story, right? New music to go with those animations and theme of whatever's happening within the new story, right? There's a lot of time, resource, and money that goes into revamping an entire story that you already created. And so that's a tough decision to make. Do we just leave the story as is and we continue moving forward? Or do we listen to the feedback of the players? We revamp and rehaul the story so that way when Wuthering Waves releases, it is released in its best form for the enjoyment of the players, so that way they are the most satisfied with the product that we provided. It's a big and tough decision to make, and the fact that they decided to go with the player feedback and revamp the story and do it within that time frame, 6 months, that had to have been a lot of pressure on Kuro to get that done. They deserve, you know, to be commended once again at the very least, at the bare minimum, and to be applauded and to receive kudos for doing that, because once again, I don't think a lot of developers or companies would have done that. I think they would have left the story as is and hoped that the players enjoyed it for what it is and continue moving forward with development, right? So that's massive in my opinion.
And what most people don't consider is how much of the current stuff has to be scrapped as a result.
Right.
The animations, voice lines from hired voice actors, and any work related to the story must be remade, which is a huge undertaking.
That's massive.
I truly commend Kuro for taking the time to put a halt to any new content in order to ensure that the initial content would be enjoyable to the upcoming player base.
And that's something that I didn't even take into consideration, to be honest with you, is that with revamping the entire story and getting that done within 6 months, that possibly halted any new content from being made. Once again, a very tough decision. Imagine sitting down in Kuro's studio or office building, whatever you want to call it, and now deciding, do we keep the story as is, even with the player feedback that we received, and move forward and develop new content so that way we can have it released for when the game officially drops? Or do we halt to new content so that way we can revamp and redo the story and make it right for the players that provided that feedback? The fact that they decided to halt the new content to revamp the story and get that done and make it right for the players, once again, needs to be commended, in my opinion. That's huge. That's massive. It leads to you putting more faith into Kuro and the developers of this game, right? At least for me, anyways.
However, my biggest concern when it comes to Wuthering Waves is the open world.
Let's hear it.
The gameplay loop would keep us from getting bored.
Right.
I know. I'm one of the people who would spend hours upon hours playing the game, as I am a content creator, and most people would have significantly less time on the game, which results in people like me finishing the content fast, but that doesn't excuse a boring open world or gameplay loop.
Okay, and that's huge, and that's something that I did want to touch on. So what Chaotic is talking about is a mindset and perspective from a content creator. What he's stating is that as a content creator, what my best interest is to get through the game as quickly as possible, dump as many hours into the game as possible, so that way I can learn as much about it as I possibly can, so that way I can provide videos as quickly as I possibly can. That is the mindset of a content creator. That's what you ideally want to do, but then that leads you getting to the end game quicker, and then that leads to there not being much to do after completing everything. What Chaotic is stating is that that shouldn't be the case, and he hopes that's not the case. He wants there to be fun, repeatable content that even if you get through the majority of the stuff, that there's still fun and engaging things to do outside of what you already done, right? Once you reach the end game, is there something there to keep you playing? Is there something there to keep you engaged, to keep you logging in and logging on and continue playing the game of Wuthering Waves? That's my 2 cents, my thoughts on what he's speaking about.
During the first global closed beta test, a huge concern among players was that the world felt like some of the competition, and the resources that you obtain for playing and using your stamina was simply just not enough.
It wasn't. It wasn't. So once again, closed beta 1, played the mess out of it. My biggest concern was the amount of resources that you received for leveling up your characters and leveling up your echoes. It was a chore. It was tedious because you did not receive enough of them. Now, I think they might have improved on that, and I hope they did, because they should have received a lot of feedback in regards to that. But when you went to one of those tacit fields to go ahead and get leveling up materials for your characters, you got maybe like 5 or 8 or 10 sometimes, and that gave you 1 to maybe 3 levels at a time. And so you had to revisit those fields consistently, and that was the majority of your time in the game. Once you did your exploration and once you fought the world bosses and stuff like that, to level up your characters, you had to visit those fields, and they just simply didn't give you enough, and you found yourself going back there way too often, more often than you wanted to, and you just didn't have enough stamina to do it, and then it left you with not much to do afterwards. So that was a huge concern for me personally, and something that if I get into closed beta 2, I want to see if that has changed in a drastic way from CBT 1 to CBT 2. But yeah, that was huge. That's a big concern of mine.
Kuro did manage to make a small yet meaningful change by introducing special versions of the echoes into the game, giving players something to collect. While that is exciting, it's still not enough. I'm hoping...
Right, I agree. So this is something that we talked about a year ago, and I brought this up in a video that I did about it. Chaotic, myself, and Vulcan went ahead and brought up the idea when we spoke about echoes. At that time, they were called Mimicry. That's how long ago it was. When we talked about them, he brought up the fact that if there were shiny echoes in the world, that would have them stay on the game for much longer, wanting to shiny hunt and, you know, explore the world to find those special rare echoes. Now, the fact that they confirmed that that is a thing and they implemented it in the game is huge, because that not only has the hardcore gamer wanting to play Wuthering Waves because of the boss fight and the gameplay and everything that goes into it, but it also now has casuals being able to have something to do outside of, you know, hardcore sweating for bosses and fighting, you know, with the gameplay and the combat. They can go throughout the world and shiny hunt or echo shiny hunt, and try and find them, right? So I think that was a very smart thing that they implemented, but Chaotic is correct, right? That's only going to last for so long. But then there has to be something outside of that. You can't just have rare echoes and think that is going to be the end all be all to the exploration and the open world. There has to be more within it, right?
During this time, there will be some things that will improve the amount of things to do in the open world. Hopefully, Kuro Games took time to look at the open world and ask themselves what they could do to make this world more interesting. Give players something to do when they have nothing else to do. Basically,
and they talked about, you know, introducing more difficult boss fights as well within the open world, where you can actually get special or rare echoes for doing it. So that is another thing that they implemented that they talked about in the dev interview. But yeah, I think there needs to be some more, which that can be implemented as the game progresses as well. They introduce more things, events that can be within the open world that you go ahead and complete. Those are things that they can implement upon official release of the game.
when we're at the end game and we're just collecting materials in order to level up our characters, our weapons, our echoes, there should be other things to do in this world in order to keep us immersed. And that's something that I felt was lacking from Wuthering Waves. Granted, it was just a closed beta test, the very first at that, and the prior experience that I had was from the Chinese exclusive technical test. There is so much time that they have in order to fix this issue, and I believe they can fix it as long as they're willing to ask themselves difficult questions in order to make sure that these things are changed very early on.
And I agree with all of that, what he stated. Closed Beta 1, once again, combat and gameplay was chef's kiss. Everything else was left to be desired. There wasn't a whole lot to do within the open world outside of collecting echoes and things of that nature, right? There wasn't really much else going on outside of that. I think Kuro is willing to ask themselves those difficult questions. Not only ask themselves those difficult questions, but then implement them within the game. And of course, we've seen that they're willing to take player feedback and be able to implement it as well to make tough decisions that will enhance the gaming experience, even if it sets them back to do so. I think they're willing to do that, and they've shown that they're willing to do that. So we just have to see what it is that they take into consideration and what it is that they do implement. And once again, I think CBT2 is going to answer a lot of questions that we're asking right now, and will show the biggest differences between CBT1 and CBT2. We'll just have to wait and see, right? But I think they are willing to do that, and I think they've shown that they're willing to do that.
Now, the combat has been improved as well, with adjustments being made to the echoes and how they help with some of the counters against bosses. Changes to the QTE system have also been made in order to allow the existence of both intro and outro QTEs.
And I've actually did a video on this. My latest video I'll probably have linked at the end of this one, where I talked about the intro and outro skills and how much more that plays into team building and possible team rotations when it comes to the characters that you're using. So I think that's huge. And the fact that they're still improving on the gameplay and the combat is a big thing to take into consideration, because it's already great. But I think they know that gameplay and combat is going to be the core important priority part of Wuthering Waves that people, you know, initially gravitate towards the game for. So continuing to improve on the mechanics and tightening those things up is something that I like to see from Kuro and from Wuthering Waves.
Feel of the camera has been improved for not only the characters but for the echoes as well, giving the players a more sense of control when playing the game.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I was already pleased with the combat during the global closed beta, so
right.
Any improvements are welcomed, and I'm just happy to see them taking the combat serious, unlike some of the competitors on the market.
A sly shot right there, but no, it is true. You know, I think once again Kuro knows that combat is important and what people are looking towards this game for specifically, right? And where they can't get it from another game, they're going to look towards Wuthering Waves to be that and to fill that hole or void that they're missing when it comes to hardcore gameplay mechanics, tightening your skills when it comes to dodges, and even being able to experience parrying to get that adrenaline rush when it comes to combat and gameplay. And that's what you're going to get from Wuthering Waves, to be able to string together combos, juggle enemies in the air, parry them, and then be able to time your attacks properly. And then with the intro and outro skills, being able to rotate your characters in such a way that you're optimizing the damage that you're doing. All these things are what I believe Kuro is going to deliver on. And once again, fact that they're tightening on certain mechanics like your camera, your targeting for certain echoes. For example, in that dev interview, they spoke about how the targeting system is going to be specific to the bosses that you're fighting, because they do have different animations. For example, the crownless flies all over the place. Your targeting system is going to be specific for the crownless, and when he's flying all over the place, your targeting is going to be spot on, right? So the fact that they're doing that is huge, and I like to see that they're still keeping gameplay and combat at the forefront.
I see huge potential for Wuthering Waves, however, I also see concerns, but I'm willing to believe that Kuro Game has learned from their experience with Punishing Grey Raven, as well as games developed by the competitors, so that Wuthering Waves can thrive in the best way possible. This is a huge opportunity, knowing that till this day, we still don't see another high-quality open-world title in the gacha market. If anyone can get the formula right in order to have another masterpiece, I believe Kuro Games is the one to do it.
And that is true, right? If you think about the open world genre, we don't have a lot to pull from, right? Genshin Impact has essentially controlled that genre, because nothing else has come out to not compete with it per se, but to be on the same level, right? A lot of people thought Tower Fantasy was going to be such that as a game to compete and to rival Genshin Impact, but it just did not deliver on what we were expecting and what we were hoping, unfortunately. I do think Wuthering Waves has the potential and the ability to do such that, but I don't want it to be a, Genshin Impact versus Wuthering Waves situation. And Wuthering Waves doesn't have to be the Genshin killer, right? Wuthering Waves can be a game that is criticized and that is developed in such a way where it's on its own merits, that you can look at Wuthering Waves for what it's delivering and then be able to provide feedback on that specifically. You don't need another game to then come out that kills the game that's been at the top for, however long, 2 to 3 years now. They can exist simultaneously in the same space, and you can realistically, and I know this might be a shocker to a lot of people, enjoy both games. You can enjoy Genshin Impact for what it is, a story-driven exploration game that is a little more casual per se, and you can enjoy Wuthering Waves that's a little more hardcore, that implements more technical, in-depth gameplay and combat. And you can have them both be within your playlist, or both be on the same system, and you can switch back and forth between the two. That is a real possibility. Or if you enjoy one over the other, then enjoy it for what it is and don't condemn the other one for being different, right? And enjoy the uniqueness of both games and enjoy them being within the same genre, right? But I think Wuthering Waves does have that opportunity. I think it does have that potential. And I think if they do still take into consideration feedback from the community, they listen to them and they improve upon what they have already, which I think is a great foundation. I think this game has a lot of success that it can see and a lot of potential that it can fill.
I'm truly hoping that Kuro Games can come up with some unique game modes that can keep players in-game even when the stamina is out, while finding balance to the material farming as well, but we'll have to wait and see. What do you think of Kuro's recent developer interview, and why are you excited for Wuthering Waves? Let me know in the comment section below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to support the upcoming Wuthering Waves content. Have a wonderful day. Stay.
So this was a great video. Now, in terms of what they can implement in order to keep players engaged past the end game, I mean, we talked about events. They can introduce puzzles. They can introduce many different things. It just really depends on how creative they want to be and, how outside of the box thinking that they want to get, right? And I do want them to come up with very unique things that they can do outside of, what we have already. Now, one thing that I did want to point out is that during this video, they, showcase different what looks like events or games to participate in, where you have the motorcycle boss and you're on that highway. That looked pretty cool. Or that Morning Ike's fight where you're in the air and you're essentially, it's like an airplane fight, right? That looked pretty cool as well. Those are some very unique things that are to Wuthering Waves specifically. They could do a lot of things with the ecosystem, you know, outside of what we have already. We've talked about echo fights, like Pokemon fights, you know, having that. I think that would be very cool, and something that not just hardcore, but the casual fans would be very interested in. So you can catch your shiny echoes, but then you can battle them as well. How cool would that be? And that would be something outside of, you know, the day-to-day daily routine that you do inside Wuthering Waves. That would be completely separate, that could keep you in the game a little bit longer, you know, and especially for the individuals that don't want to be the hardcore sweaty gamers. They just, you know, want to catch their shiny echoes, but then they want to do something with them, right? You have the figurines, which I think was a fantastic idea, and it's the little things that go a long way. The figurines, I think, is cool. Being able to showcase your echoes, your shiny echoes to co-op would be really cool. Let's expound upon the uniqueness of Wuthering Waves, which is not only combat and gameplay and characters and story and all that good stuff, but it's the ecosystem. There's no other open world exploration game that has that. So let's go ahead and capitalize on it. Shiny echoes, fantastic. Let's battle with those echoes, right? Not only can you showcase them in those battles, but now you're actually using them in a way that's different than what you're normally doing within combat. I think that would be fantastic, and I think a lot of players would really, really enjoy that. But that might be something that comes out down the road, right? Something that they can implement later, and that would be fine. I would be okay with that. But let me know your thoughts. Let me know your comments below. Let me know your opinions, and certainly go over to Chaotic, show him some support. Comment on his video, give your thoughts and opinions, and I'm sure this can get a great discussion going all around for everybody and make Wuthering Waves as great as possible. So anyways, thank you guys so much for all the support. I do truly appreciate it, and I'll see you all in the next one. Remember to stand out, be different, have fun, go further beyond in everything that you do. My name is Cody. You call me further. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.